Hello, beautiful. Welcome to the She Sacral podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Christian. Let's go ahead and get started with today's episode. Hello, sacral beauties. Welcome to the She Sacral podcast, where we focus on burnout recovery through the power of sacred pleasure. We've been talking all about the 12 stages of burnout, and we are moving into the halfway point where we're focusing on stage 6. This is the stage where denial is really running the show, and we are constantly saying, I'm fine as a mask. So if you find yourself struggling on the inside, but trying to put on this happy face on the outside, and you are completely denying everything to yourself of how burnout is really affecting you, this is the perfect episode for you. So let's talk a little bit about how we even get to this point. We start off by trying to prove ourselves, and then we keep working harder. We start neglecting our needs. We then start numbing ourselves. We start changing our values. And now we're to a point where all of that has occurred, but yet we're still saying, I'm fine. So some signs that you may be in the stage is if you're refusing help or support or even compliments, if you're trying to push through any kind of illness or grief or exhaustion, and you're really seeing rest and support or emotional vulnerability as a threat, not a source of safety. So you may begin to isolate yourself and disguising that as independence. You may not be trusting of help or even get irritated at the thought of someone being more concerned for you or trying to help you. That just becomes really annoying at that stage. And you can be living in a state of overfunctioning while kind of hiding your burnout symptoms. So the fact that you even clicked on this episode lets me know that you are ready to start turning that ship. And that's why I also love the She Sacral community, because we all get it. We all understand what it means to be burned out. We understand what it means to try to push through. You should never feel alone in this. And I would absolutely love to have you join the She Sacral community. So you can click the link down below. So let's talk about the root cause of this episode. This is really stemming from being in a space of survival mode and also allowing for shame to run the show. You may have experienced cultural programming such as strong women handle it all, right? Have you ever heard that, where it's like, you're a woman, you're strong, you could do everything, don't let anybody tell you can't do it. And sometimes we take that a little too strong to heart, and that can become a negative sometimes when we're not allowing for ourselves to rest and listen to our bodies. You may have some childhood patterns of self-reliance or emotional suppression. So if you grew up in a household where you really didn't have that support, you didn't have someone that created a very emotionally safe environment for you to relax, to be free, to have fun, to be at ease, and maybe you felt like relying on someone else was actually a threat. Maybe you couldn't rely on anyone else and you just had to learn how to depend on yourself. You may have a fear of being seen as needy or weak or incapable of being able to do your tasks or do the things that you're working on. So feeling like you need to share what's going on or being vulnerable about, hey, I'm really struggling right now, but I'm doing the best that I can, that actually feels like failure to you to even be able to admit that. You may feel guilty for even needing rest or having limits, and you may also lack safe models for vulnerability. So if you didn't grow up with seeing someone be able to be vulnerable, to be recognized and honored for being vulnerable, if you saw that maybe your mom or women in your household couldn't be vulnerable, when they were vulnerable, they were taken advantage of, or they were mistreated, or they were controlled. And that can really shape your mindset and your belief system in being able to feel safe with vulnerability. So if silencing yourself feels safe to you, then being able to admit the truth of what's happening, of what's going on, can feel really terrifying. I want to dive in and talk a little bit more about how this stage impacts our hormones and our nervous system. When we're in this space, our sympathetic nervous system becomes the dominant nervous system. We have the parasympathetic nervous system and we have the sympathetic nervous system. So parasympathetic is going to be that rest and digest, when your body can relax, when you can digest food easily, you don't have any upset stomach. You know, when you feel really stressed and your stomach gets really tight, that's a sign that we're in fight or flight. You're able to sleep really easily. Your heart rate feels nice and regulated. But when you're in the sympathetic mode, that's when our body stays in fight or flight. So cortisol is going to be really high. You may notice your heart rate is irregular. You may notice it's really hard for you to just relax, and you may feel all over the place. Your adrenal glands go into overdrive. And so again, your cortisol starts flooding your system. Your immune system becomes more suppressed, so you may notice that you may get sick more easily, and you may experience more inflammation in your body. We talked about the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary axis, which is where your brain is sending those messages to your body to make sure that it's regulating itself. We talked about that in the previous episodes, but in this stage, this is where sleep is really suffering. You may experience a lot of energy crashes and a lot of anxiety spikes, and it can feel like you can't get it regulated. Sometimes it may even happen when nothing is even causing for you to experience that, because your body has been in this state for so long. Your emotional energy becomes blocked, so you may notice like internally you just feel like just really frustrated, or you feel like you're going to break inside. Or you may notice that you are numbing and shutting down internally. So if you notice that you have a lot of irritability or low emotional tolerance, poor immune system, and if you notice that inside you really are so tired and so fatigued, but it is being masked by being in overdrive, this is definitely a sign that we've already reached the halfway point in burnout of stage 6. So I want to move forward and share with you just some ways of reframing denial as self-protection, which is kind of what we've learned over time. And this is not something that we've learned recently. This is kind of what's been taught to us from whatever experiences we've been in. When we're in a state of denial, we're really trying to protect ourselves. It's almost like pulling this one little hair out of this big haystack, and if you pull it, everything's going to fall apart. You may just feel like you're trying to get through this rough time. You're trying to be positive. You're trying to look forward and say, you know, hey, I just want to keep my eye on the prize. Once I get there and I get over this hump and I win, or I reach my goal, or I reach wherever I want to be, then I'll handle it. But the crazy part is a lot of times that goalpost keeps moving, doesn't it? We start getting new ideas and new visions, and we never allow for ourselves to actually rest. So when we talk about denial, it's really more of a defense mechanism against feeling really overwhelmed. So you may have needed this mask to kind of cope and get through what you're going through, but it's important to know that you don't need it forever. And naming what's true for you, naming what's honest, and being able to just acknowledge it starts to create the space for healing. And sometimes we think we're being really strong by being in the state of denial. It's like, oh, well, I got this. I can handle it. I don't need anybody. I can do it on my own. I'm fine, even though inside you're falling apart. We can view this as a form of strength, but strength isn't about holding it in. It's about letting it move through you, where you experience it, you acknowledge it, you let it go, and you move on to the next thing, right? You're letting it move through you. You're listening to your body. You're resting when you need to rest. You're hydrating, you're nourishing, you're moving, you're laughing. You're still doing these things and acknowledging the things that are stressing you out in the process. And so I want you to know that admitting that you're not okay is not weakness. We want to be able to acknowledge the wisdom we have within ourselves and have courage to admit that we're not okay. Maybe you're trying to put on this face for your family or your kids or your partner, or even just for yourself or for social media or for whoever. But inside, I want you to know that it's okay to not be okay. In fact, we're all not okay. We're all kind of putting on this face, even if we are struggling on the inside. So with that being said, let's talk about some ways we can begin to shift the energy. I want to share some things with you that we do in the She Sacral community. I want you to take a sacred reset day. Just take a full day to just reflect, to rest, to receive without guilt. Unplug your phone. Do a 24-hour just phone off day. No scrolling or anything. Allow for your nervous system to completely reset. We're going to turn off that performance mode. We're going to tune into our bodies, our breath, and what's really going on just for one day. And a lot of times you may notice your body will try to get those breaks for you when you feel sick or when you feel weak or you don't feel your best. And so your body really does want this reset day, but it is really helpful when we can begin to work with our bodies and work with our minds to have that reset day without us running our bodies into the ground and being sick in order to have rest. We don't want to create the association of sickness with rest. You can also start practicing with asking. So I know that asking for a lot of people can be a challenge. So some things you could do is just do some low energy asks like, hey, do you think you can bring me some water? Or do you have space to listen today? Or can you help me decide with something? Just things that don't require a lot of input from anybody else. That way it's not going to trigger any guilt from you. And if this is something that's still really challenging for you to do, you can literally practice with ChatGPT or AI. I do this all of the time where I'm like, hey, I just need to get something out. I just need to vent. And that will actually start to create a pattern for you to feel comfortable with asking for the help that you need. Again, I know this can be really loaded because sometimes we may have asked in the past, maybe we've received some rejection, maybe we didn't receive what we asked for, maybe it came with strings attached. Whatever the case may be, we want to start to shift our mindset around how we view asking. Because as the old saying goes, ask and you shall receive, okay? You are allowed to need help. It is okay for you to need help, and you deserve care even when you don't perform. And I know that's hard to break, to come out of this performing mode and to just connect deeper with yourself. There are some people, and if you fall into this category, we will definitely do some episodes on this in the future. But for many of us, we have learned to perform our entire lives. And especially for a lot of influencers that are out there, everything is so performative. And you can almost create an identity of performing to where you don't even really know who you are after the show stops. Know that you are more than worthy. You are very valuable for just being you without you needing to perform. All right, so if this episode resonated with you, please leave a comment down below. Stay tuned for our next stage of stage 7, where we're going to dive into when we move into full withdrawal, okay, where we're really pulling ourselves away from our everyday life. And so if that sounds familiar to you, definitely be sure to tune into the next episode. Thank yourself so much for showing up today, and thank you for tuning in to the She Sacral podcast.